Have you ever heard the expression, home is where the heart is? I'm sure you have. It's a rather common saying. I had never really thought too hard about it. For me, it was just one of those cheesy little things you'd see printed on those decorative signs that old people hang in their kitchens. It's not really a metaphor that anyone would really think on. It's just there, an accepted part of our vernacular as a culture. Nothing more, nothing less. Still, it has become something much more literal to me in recent years. When I say literal, I don't mean I went all Edgar Allan Poe and hid a man's heart under my floorboards. I promise there are no human vital organs stashed around my home. I mean literal in a deeper way than the proverb itself intended. If you Google the saying, you'll get a few varying meanings. Still, basically, it's trying to put across the idea of your home being a sacred place of love and comfort. It's a treasured location where your family gathers. It is a place where you feel the safest. It's your own personal haven and no one else's. You see, though, that's where my problem comes in. When a home becomes a little too personal. Have you ever noticed those old dilapidated houses? You know, the ones that have been sitting alone for countless numbers of years. They always have varying amounts of wear on them. Some have chipped paint, cracked windows, but then there's others that have almost collapsed on themselves. The thing these houses have in common is that they've all been abandoned by their human occupants. Naturally, houses fall apart, of course, but there's something about them being left without owners that speeds up the course of their disintegration. Why is that, though? One would think that having owners who abuse a home would be worse for it than just being left be. It's like they die. Their heart is gone, and there's nothing left keeping them alive, so their bodies crumble. Just like what would happen to a living person. People that follow the supernatural probably know about the different types of hauntings. If you've ever watched those ridiculous ghost hunting shows, you've probably heard the terms. Experts classify hauntings two different ways, intelligent and residual. Intelligent hauntings are the kind that one would most likely think of when hearing the word haunting. It would be a spirit attachment to a house or a thing. Intelligent hauntings are the kind that interact with people, tap on their shoulders, or pull their hair. Residual hauntings are kind of different. They aren't the spirits of dead former residents, but rather imprints. It's kind of like the energy of the people that lived there have been embedded into the home and are set on repeat, to be replayed in a ghostly manner for the rest of days. Memories of former occupants are marked into the house. Their energy mingles with it and brings it to life. That kind of haunting can't hurt or touch. It only shows. It's not just death that marks the house, though. The moment someone steps into it, they become a part of it. The longer they stay inside, the more they shape the house, and the more the house shapes them. Homes are the most personal things human beings can really have. Some people never seem to find them bouncing from one place to another. Many people still find that one place that they think they'll be at forever. To them, it becomes a part of a family. Like a child, a baby to care for, but really it's the house that cares for them. It protects them from nature and from other harmful humans. It is a force of strength and security. The house sees things that no one else sees. It hears things that no one else hears. It knows every secret desire and action. It knows you as well as you know yourself. That's why, in a way, it's dangerous. Should it spontaneously grow lips, it could tell that secret of yours. That deep, dark thing you don't want anyone else to know. Fortunately, that's I would say impossible. However, improbable is probably a better word. Unlikely. Every waking moment you spend inside your home, you become part of it, and it becomes part of you. You know how you've grown attached to that one inanimate thing for some reason. A stuffed animal, a blanket, maybe a bracelet. That's the home relationship, but 10,000-fold. I'm probably not making much sense, but I've had a while to think about this. Hell, that's all I ever do anymore. The more I think about it, the more it all adds up. It makes sense. And that scares me. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing, not really. Well, at least as long as you don't mind a little unhealthy attachment, like that crazy boyfriend that threatens to kill himself if you leave. If truly you're willing to give it your everything, then go right ahead. It'll be the greatest thing you can ask for, the kind of relationship you'll find. Just don't plan on leaving. Not unless you want to fight. Maybe I should explain by giving my example, lest you not understand enough to heed the warning I wish to give. My parents bought our home a little over a year before I was born. They had been married for a few years and had decided it was time to upgrade from their city apartment. They wanted to have a family and needed room to expand. It's a common story that many young couples share. The house was just outside the bustling city in the upper-class suburbs. In the early 90s, it was a thing of modernism. It was 2 stories with a small attic, a small basement, 3 bedrooms, and 3 baths. The outside was vinyl and beige, with white edges and window borders. It was your basic, unremarkable styled home. My parents bought it brand new. It had only been on the market a couple of months, and had been put up for sale just after construction was complete. No one had ever lived there before. They were the first ones to ever spend a single night there. It was like a newborn child meeting its parents for the first time. It was fresh, new, untainted, and pure. We were the first there. We were the only ones to ever have the opportunity to shape it. That's where the real problem lies. You're the only known thing, the only energy ever imprinting upon the structure. When you move into a house already touched by multiple people, it doesn't attach itself to you in such a way as those that only know you. It's like if you're used to being disappointed, you brush it off when it happens again. If you have always gotten everything you've ever wanted, then when you don't get it, you're going to be devastated. I'm not saying homes can be devastated, but I'm getting off track. I was brought back to the house when I was only a week old, and from that moment it was the only home I ever knew. There was something about the stability and comfort that steadied me. Through the years, my mere presence made its mark on the house, and not just in a metaphorical way. There were 4 knobs of scuffs on the hardwood floor where they put my baby bed. My mom tried to buff them out, but it was never possible. The doorway was bled with permanent marker, where my parents tracked my height growth. It was kept up to date until we moved out. There were tack holes all throughout the walls where I had pinned up my posters as a young teen. It was just the right kind of wear. It looked loved. Things were perfect in the house, but not in my parents' marriage. They started fighting, and that's when it all started. The intensity was practically palpable. I could feel it, and I was only 12 years old. It made the whole air in the house wrong. My parents gave one another the cold shoulder, and it trickled down to me. I went from being a happy, hyper child to a kid who thought she was best locked in her room. I didn't want to make too much noise and draw too much attention to myself. I was afraid if I did, they would turn their mutual hatred onto me. So my room became a cell of melancholy. I started dressing in all black and listening to sad music. I don't think any of us realized at the time the chain effect it had. It was as if the whole family dynamic had shifted. They fought, and I distanced myself. I don't know how long it went on before I noticed the activity. It could have been months, but I had been so oblivious at that point that it never managed to catch my attention. It was just before midnight on a weekday. I remember it that way because my mother had lectured me about going to bed early to get up for school. I just rolled my eyes at her and refocused it on my book. The house had settled down and my parents were in bed. I had lost track of time, and when I finally looked up, I realized what time it was. My eyes were burning from exhaustion, and I decided it was probably best if I just went to bed. When I got out of bed to go to the bathroom, I kicked something soft that had been sitting about a foot from my bed. I looked down and realized it was a plush duck. My plush duck, Mr. Quacker's. Mr. Quacker's had been a childhood best friend, but when I rearranged my room a year back, he had went up to the attic, and with most of my childhood items. Oddly, I had been looking for him earlier that day, but was unable to find the box he was stashed in. I'd been rather upset, feeling like a part of my childhood was gone. I had gotten angry and shouted about how everything good had gone to hell. Mom screamed not to cuss. When I saw Mr. Quacker's, I figured that my mom had managed to find him and had left him for me, and I just hadn't noticed her do so. I sat the duck on my dresser, tucking him neatly beside my stuffed animal skeleton cat. I left to brush my teeth. I was only gone a few moments, but when I returned, Mr. Quacker's was sitting on my bed. He was sitting neatly on my pillow, turned to the right so that he was facing my door. His black, glassy eyes stared into me as I walked in. Admittedly, I really wasn't scared. I was simply confused. "What are you doing there?" I asked. Of course, the stuffed duck didn't answer. I moved Mr. Quacker's back to the dresser and went about my nightly routine. Once I was done, I climbed into my bed and pulled the covers over my head. I popped a CD into my CD player and slipped the headphones over my ears. Once I was all cuddled up and listening to music, I quickly drifted off to sleep. I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door shutting. It wasn't a slam, but a gentle click. The only reason I heard it was because my music had oddly stopped. The CD player ran on batteries, but it also had a wall plug. When I slept, I kept it plugged in so that it didn't die. I knew I hadn't forgotten to plug it in. I checked the outlet and discovered that the socket was totally empty. The oddest thing was that the cord wasn't just hanging by the edge of its brackets, but it was wound up neatly and placed on the edge of my end table. I plugged it back in and the CD eked back to life and played muffled from the headphones on my bed. As I turned back to the bed, I caught Mr. Quacker's out of the corner of my eye. He hadn't moved from the spot, but his new companion, Skeleton Kitty, was lying on the floor with her face down against the carpet. Again, I didn't feel fear. I picked the cat up and placed her back where she had been since I had gotten her for my birthday. I looked critically at Mr. Quacker, squinting at him. He felt the same as he always did. I picked him up from the spot and tossed him on my bed. I cuddled up next to him, pulling my headphones back over my ears and falling back to sleep. I don't think I mentioned the activity to my mom or dad. Honestly, I must have been sleep-deprived because I didn't find it out of the ordinary. Looking back, that's my first memory of the occurrences, but I may have brushed it off because in some subconscious part of my mind I recognized it. Maybe it had happened before, and I had simply forgotten over time or repressed the memory. It was something harmless, comforting even. It didn't frighten me, it just was. After the first activity, things happened on occasion. I was never really threatened, and it was never anything large. It was similar on scale of the Mr. Quacker's incident. That was until my dad left. I was 15 when he made the decision. He and my mom were fighting a lot, and he just couldn't take the grief anymore. I don't blame him. They were killing each other and killing me. There was no happiness, and the only way to salvage our sanity was to just call it quits. They knew that, and he removed himself from the situation. My dad was staying with his friends while trying to work out some kind of arrangement with my mom. He came by a few times to visit me, but every time he stepped foot inside, he and my mom would break into a war. "I can't take this anymore!" he screamed one day and left the house for good. He found a place a couple hours away and sent movers to get the rest of his things. He said, "I don't want to step a single foot in this house ever again." He kept true to his word. I never really thought of it before, but perhaps he had seen some of the weird things going on. And maybe it led to his decision. After a few weeks of his absence, it began to actually settle in that he wasn't coming back, and that it was just going to be me and my mom from then on. Just us and the house that no longer really felt like a home. He wasn't there. We were fractured, and it was obvious. One night, after about a month later, shit started getting really weird. My mom had fallen asleep on the sofa watching some reality TV. I was up in my room dozing off when I heard the door slam. It wasn't my door, but it was loud and came like a sharp wood-on-wood high-velocity crack from down the hall. I jumped up, snapped wide awake from the audio jolt. It was definitely my parents' room. The bathroom door still had a stopper on it from when I was a toddler. It was physically unable to slam it. At first, I thought it was my mom. But she wouldn't slam doors, and I could still hear the angry New Jersey women arguing downstairs. I crept to the closed door. I was pretty certain it had been open the last time I'd passed by. Curiously and cautiously, I opened it. I pushed it slowly open while peeking through the crack. My mom's room was painted in silver moonlight that streamed from the large pane windows. It cast an almost lovely vision on the basic bedroom outline. Shadows of a bed, a dresser, and other furniture were all that were really visible, at first view anyway. As I shrugged it off and moved to shut the door, something out of place caught my eye. I quickly snapped my vision up to it, and the air in my throat stuck. Standing on the far side of the room, in front of the window, was a dark, shadowy silhouette of a man. It was completely motionless, standing like a shadow with its head tilted down towards my mom's bed. It was looking right at what had previously been my dad's side of the bed. I couldn't see its eyes, or it didn't have any, but part of me felt its longing in the stare. It was almost as if the creature was permeating sadness at my father's absence. Whatever it was, it understood and mimicked my and my mom's pain. I didn't mean to, but I let out a little gasp. It was one of true, utter shock, and it was kind of loud. Suddenly the creature's head snapped up and turned directly at me. At that angle, I still couldn't see any features. I doubted that it had any. He was like a moving, living shadow. I could sense its confusion. It was as if it didn't know why I could see it. There was a tiny little nonsensical whisper that emanated from it as it started to move towards me. It didn't seem to want to hurt me, but I wasn't taking any chances. I spun around and darted from the room without so much as a backward glance. I slept downstairs with my mom that night. I didn't mention anything about the shadow to my mom. She was under a lot of stress, and I didn't want to pile anything on. I didn't see it again for quite some time. One night, however, I woke to see the same shadow, staring at me from my doorway. When it noticed me, it backed away from the room and vanished down the hall. Still, I kept my mouth shut. It kept happening, though. The occurrences weren't frequent or threatening, but they were jarring. I mean, who was cool with being startled awake by a faceless black mass observing you when you're most vulnerable? I tried to ignore it, but it was difficult. After about a year of the two of us living in the house that had once held our family, my mom decided she didn't want to be there anymore. It held too many memories for her. Honestly, I was heartbroken. I felt like my whole life was being thrown into limbo. That was the only house I'd ever known, and I was going to be removed from it. Over the next month, we packed everything up and prepared to move into the apartment my mom had signed for in the city. We both felt a little melancholy at the decision, and the whole house was sad once more. I saw the creature more during that period, and it was becoming distressing. On the last day that we were going to be staying in the house, shit really went down. My mom had to work late. She was a nurse, and there was some big emergency, like a huge car accident that caused a rush. She didn't know when she would get back. So I was left there alone in a house that was a shell of itself. For almost 2 decades, it had been occupied by us and our belongings. Then, it was just stuffed cardboard boxes and decos. It was a somber shell of good memories. I was lying on a little pallet I had made in replace of my absent bed. It was too silent for me to sleep, but I was trying. The first time I heard the whispers, I tried to ignore them. I didn't want to face what was calling my name. I just wanted it to leave me be. I was so sick of seeing that shadow, and now it wanted my attention. I squeezed my eyes closed and tried to phase him out. Then it was like a hiss, right in my ear, a growling shriek of my name, demanding me to give it my attention. I rolled away from it, spinning quickly so that I could see it. Close up, it was a towering mass that was black as night. It had no facial features and kind of hovered like an inky smoke. It didn't emanate sadness. This time, I felt anger. I scrambled, trying to move away from it as it reached down for me.
Why are you leaving me?
It hissed.
Where are you going?
I jumped up and rushed out the front door. I scrambled down the yard in my PJs and stumbled out into the street. I spun around and looked back at the home. I saw the door slam shut and the black mass of the creature move past the windows. It made its way up to my bedroom. There it hovered, staring out at me. After a moment, it turned away and the bedroom window shattered. Glass spewed from the house down onto the lawn. I just stood there watching in horror. Still, I never told my mom what happened. I was afraid she would think I was crazy. I just told her that I'd accidentally knocked a box into the window and had broken it. She was confused, though, when I refused to leave the house. She was confused when I refused to return to the house, however. It took me a while to figure out exactly what had happened. As I stated previously, we were the first occupants of that brand new house. There had been no deaths there, so it wasn't haunted. I checked out, there was no ancient Native American burial grounds. There was nothing that could cause a spirit to be there. Nothing that could cause any kind of haunting. Except for us. Everything in this world has its own energy. And when you spend too much time around one thing or another, your energy will mingle together. You become more alike. You affect and imprint upon each other. What happened in my home had been what I assume to be a manifestation of tangled energy. My and my parents all had energy that mixed together with the house. We had been within it for so long that it had become almost sentient in a way. It was a reflection of us, and we were its attachment. When my father left, it lost a link of itself. When it saw that my mother and I were going to be leaving as well, it was angered. It was afraid to lose all of itself, and it lashed out. It acted like any person who may lose their everything. The problem is that this isn't an isolated phenomenon. It could happen anywhere, to anyone, as long as it is happy it will not lash out. But the problem comes in when it becomes unhappy. Knowing what I know has made me somewhat of a hermit. I'm afraid of growing an attachment to another property and having that thing, or a new thing, come back. I'm afraid to go anywhere near my old home. I'm even afraid to go into other people's homes. Who knows what may have been left behind there? If the shadow is a reflection of someone's personality, what would a serial killer produce? I move between apartments, not wanting to stay in one place for too long. I have trouble connecting with other people because I'm afraid what a relationship might produce. It's hard to be normal. But this I just want to warn you. Because who knows what you, your family, and your house might create. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. This has been the first creepypasta I've written in a very long time. If you're curious about the other things I've written, they're actually like the first two things I ever recorded. The narrations themselves are pretty shitty. One of the stories is pretty shitty. The other one's pretty good. This story, I'm afraid, came off a little not as good as it could have been because I did end up rushing it. I have a pretty slow writing process, and if I don't want to write, it's really hard for me to force myself. But I kind of ended up forcing myself on this project because I wanted to get it done for my Halloween countdown. Which is a problem because it didn't come out as good as it did. I might do a few tweaks to it, and maybe in the future I'll do a rereading of it with its new added on parts or whatever. But I want you guys to tell me what you think of this story that I wrote in the comments below. Only 3 more days till Halloween.